Breath tore through his chest like broken glass. Caleb ran, fast and barefoot, across a stretch of tangled forest where every branch reached out like claws to hold him back. Blood from his hands slicked the bark he used to steady himself. Fresh cuts burning where barbed wire had kissed the skin back at the fence line. Another shotgun blast ripped the air behind him, closer than before. He didn't dare look back, just kept going. Left, then right, down through brambles and stinging nettles that clawed at his legs. He was a shadow now, a whisper between trees, trying to outrun death. The air was thick with summer rot. Humidity clung to his throat, weighed down his chest. Every step was fire. Every breath was war. Behind him, the dogs howled, raw and wild. Fowler must have let them loose after him. Same way he'd done with that boy Elijah last month. Elijah never came back. They said the buzzards were circling the ridge for days. Caleb didn't want to be buzzard food. He didn't want to be another whisper buried in the woods. He'd lived too long in shadows, hid behind wood piles, under wagons, between rows of sugarcane no one bothered to check. Since Mama died, sweat-drenched and moaning in that fever shack, they'd left him alone, or so he thought. But the world don't forget black boys, not even the ones trying not to be seen. The wrong glance, the wrong moment, and you're back under somebody's boot. That night, he'd gotten bold, stole some cornbread and a jar of lard from the smokehouse. He hadn't even made it 10 steps before Fowler spotted him. "You best run, Rat." The overseer had sneered, raising that rusted shotgun. "Let's see how far you get." Now, Caleb could hear the man's heavy boots thundering behind him, along with the snarls of dogs bred to kill. He tore through brush, barely dodging a fallen tree, sliding down a shallow slope slick with moss. He skidded into a ditch, scrambled up the other side. He could feel the fire in his lungs now, like someone had stuffed hot coals down his throat. He had no plan, no food, no shoes, no water, just an ache in his belly and a prayer on his lips. He kept moving. He wasn't even sure which direction freedom lay anymore. North? South? Did it matter? The war had ended 2 years ago, but the only thing that changed was who wore the uniform. The land still hunted men like him. The badge had just changed hands. A crow cawed somewhere overhead. Ominous. Caleb glanced up. Thick clouds curling, fat with rain. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. Not properly. And now the storm was coming. Somewhere ahead, past a thicket of oak and birch, the forest opened into a forgotten clearing. Vines twisted around old wooden scaffolding and sunken fire pitch black with age. A ruined Union Army camp. From the looks of it, a graveyard of ghosts and mold. Caleb slowed, ears twitching like a deer's. No movement, no voices, just the sound of wind and thunder rolling in. He ducked under a broken support beam and crawled into what used to be a field tent. Torn canvas flapped above him, fluttering like a dying bird. The earth inside was soft, damp. He collapsed onto it, trembling. He didn't even try to wipe the sweat from his brow, just curled into himself and listened. No footsteps, no growls. Not yet. Something sharp pressed against his thigh. He shifted and pulled out a saber, its blade dulled and chipped. A soldier's relic. He held it in his shaking hands, almost reverent. In the corner lay a rusted tin cup. He snatched it up and drank the pooled rain inside like it was holy water. Then he saw it, nailed to a tree just outside the tent. A weather-worn map. Faded lines. Union supply routes long abandoned. Most of the names were smeared by time and rain, but one circle still showed. A tiny settlement farther west, scrawled beside a creek. Hope, or maybe a lie. Didn't matter. He collapsed back on the ground. Thunder rumbled overhead. The first droplets fell like whispers across his skin, cold and sharp. The saber lay across his chest like a promise he couldn't keep. His eyes drifted shut. And then he saw her. Mama. She was in that little wooden room, sitting on the edge of her straw bed, humming a tune. Her hands worked the hem of his old shirt. She looked tired, like always, but strong. Her voice came soft, laced with sorrow and scripture. Asterisk, you just keep walking, baby. Don't you let no man turn you to stone inside. Asterisk. His throat tightened. He wanted to cry, but didn't have the tears left. He felt carved out. Lightning struck nearby. The crack shook him out of the vision. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Not hurried. Careful. Calculated. Lighter than Fowler's boots. Not the dog's either. Caleb sat up, slow. He reached for the saber and crouched by the flap of the tent. His heart pounded so loud he was sure it would give him away. Through the curtain of rain, a figure emerged. Tall, broad, unmoving, bare chest painted in ash and clay. Braids hung down to his shoulders. Eyes fixed, dark and unreadable. The man didn't speak, didn't raise a weapon. He just stood there, silent and still. Caleb's knuckles turned white on the saber's grip, and the storm swallowed them both. The figure didn't flinch. Rain soaked his braids and ran in rivulets down his painted chest, streaking red clay and ash into something like war. His eyes, dark and still, locked on Caleb's. Not angry, not curious, just present, like the trees, like the storm. Caleb didn't breathe. His knuckles stayed white around the saber's grip. The man stepped forward, slow, careful. His feet made no sound against the wet leaves. A bough was slung across his back, its string dark with water, and a quiver hung from his hip. No words, just a raised hand, palm open, then lowered, motioning Caleb down. Caleb hesitated. Then he obeyed. The man knelt beside the tent, eyes flicked toward the trees. Caleb strained to hear. Then he did, the dogs again. Closer, barking, snapping. The thunder of boots behind them. Fowler was coming. The man reached over Caleb and pulled an arrow from his quiver, its tip bone-white and gleaming. He rose like smoke and disappeared into the trees without sound. Moments passed like hours. Caleb lay still, saber across his chest, heart slamming against ribs. Then, yowling, a snarl cut short. A bark turned to a yelp. Silence. He peeked through the flap. 2 dogs lay motionless on the forest floor, arrows sunk deep into their sides. No sign of the man. No sign of Fowler. Just rain and the whisper of wet leaves. That night, Caleb didn't sleep. At dawn, he left a ruined camp. He didn't know why. Something told him to follow. Maybe it was fear. Maybe hope. Maybe both. But he walked quiet as he could, heading west, toward where the arrows had flown. He found footprints. Not boot prints. Barefoot, light. He followed them through moss and river rock, past deer trails and rabbit paths. The man left small signs, a feather tied to a low branch, stones stacked in threes, a strip of rabbit hide dangling from a pine. By midday, Caleb saw him again, kneeling beside a creek, washing blood from his blade. He didn't look up. Caleb approached slow. When he got close, the man stood, handed him a piece of smoked meat, and turned to walk away. No words. Caleb followed. They walked for hours. Caleb tried to talk. Thank you, back there. No answer. My name's Caleb. Nothing. Just a glance, then silence. At night, the man made a fire. Showed Caleb how to build it, not with matches, but flint and bark. Caleb tried. Failed. Tried again. When the flame caught, he almost smiled. The man offered him dried berries and venison, then slept with his back to a tree, bough across his lap. No name, no voice, but something solid, something ancient. The next day they climbed, higher into the hills. Rock slid underfoot. The air thinned. Trees grew sparse. Caleb's legs ached. He didn't complain. At a ridge, the man pointed, far off, past a valley, where smoke rose from a cabin's chimney. Caleb squinted. Could have been a home. Could have been danger. Either way, it was far. They moved on. Nights grew colder. Once, Caleb woke to the sound of growling. A bear, huge and scarred, stood 10 feet away, eyes glinting. Caleb froze. The man, there before Caleb even moved, raised his bow and loosed an arrow. It struck the bear's shoulder. The beast roared and charged. Caleb didn't think. He shouted, waved his arms, hurled a stone. The bear turned on him. The man moved like a ghost, drove a second arrow straight into the beast's throat. It collapsed, twitching. Caleb stared, panting. The man met his eyes, nodded once, then turned to gut the bear. They skinned it that night, cooked its meat over pine wood. The man gave Caleb a piece of its fur. For warmth, he guessed, but when he wrapped it around his shoulders, it felt like something more. A mark, a rite. By the fifth night, they hadn't spoken a single word. Caleb sat by the fire, staring into the embers. The quiet was heavy, safe, but it also pressed on the parts of him he kept buried. "My mama used to sit by the fire like this," he said softly, more to the flames than to the man. "She'd hum when she didn't want me to hear her crying." The man didn't respond, just added another log. "She got whipped once for sneaking me cornbread. They tore her back open. Blood soaked through her dress. And she still sang that night. Same way she did when I was a baby." His voice cracked. "I watched her get dragged off one night. Didn't see her again. I hid. Didn't move. Thought if I stayed small enough, maybe I'd survive." The man didn't speak, but he reached into a pouch at his side and pulled out something, small, carved from wood, a bear totem. He placed it gently beside Caleb. Then he sat beside him. Caleb picked it up, ran his fingers over the grooves. It was worn smooth, the kind of thing someone had kept for a long time. "Why you help me?" he whispered. No answer, but he didn't need one. He saw it now. The silence wasn't emptiness. It was weight. The man carried something older than grief. The way he moved, the way he watched the world, it wasn't just survival. It was memory. He had lost two. A home, a people, a way of life. Maybe a son. That night, Caleb didn't cry. He just sat, warming his hands, feeling the bear fur around his shoulders and the totem in his pocket. They kept moving. The forest changed. Thicker. The trees leaned close, whispering secrets. One morning, Caleb woke before the sun. The fire had died. He stood, stretched, and saw them. Footprints. Boot prints. Fresh. He crouched, heart sinking. The man was already up, watching from the trees. He looked at Caleb, then the prints, then pointed west urgently. They packed quickly, moved faster now, but they weren't alone. By dusk, they made camp beneath a low rock shelf. The wind howled. Caleb chewed dried meat with shaking hands. The man crouched beside the fire, took a stick, and drew in the dirt. A circle, 8 lines inside it. Caleb frowned. "What is it?" The man drew another shape. A cross. Not a church cross, something else. A mark. Recognition dropped like ice in Caleb's gut. Raiders. Slavers. They were being hunted again. Not by Fowler. By something worse. The man handed him a blade. Not the saber. Something smaller. Carved bone. Sharp. Clean. Caleb took it, fingers trembling. He met the man's eyes. This time, the silence between them said everything. They would fight, or they would die, but they would not run. Not anymore. The earth was cold beneath Caleb's knees as he packed the final trap. Spike pit, hidden beneath leaves. Dakota knelt beside him, tightening the twine with a hunter's precision. No words. None needed. The fire crackled a few yards away, low and silent, shielded by rock. Around them, shadows deepened. Wind brushed through pine needles and whispers. Night was coming fast. They'd spent the day preparing, digging shallow ditches, stringing bells from bone and string, silent alarms that would rattle if a foot disturbed them. Dakota had drawn a rough plan in the dirt that morning, mapping every tree and blind spot. Caleb memorized it. There was no more fear in him. Not like before. His hands moved with purpose now. He double-knotted the snare rope and looked over at the man who taught him everything without ever saying a word. The boy who had once trembled in a burned-out Union camp was gone. He had bled, fought, endured, and now he stood ready beside a man who'd lost a people, a home, and still chose to protect. They didn't speak the same language, but they knew the same grief. A crow screamed in the distance. They waited. The moon rose, half full, veiled in drifting clouds. Then came the signal, just as Dakota said it would. A whistle, shrill, offbeat, followed by the crunch of careless boots. Caleb crouched behind a boulder, heart hammering, fingers tight on the bone knife. Figures emerged through the trees. 8 of them, lanterns swinging, guns slung. Rough men, coats turned inside out, pistols in one hand, torches in the other. One wore a Confederate belt buckle, stained with rust. Their leader stepped forward, cocky swagger, rifle resting on his shoulder. "You got something belongs to us," he called into the dark. Dakota didn't respond. Caleb stayed still. Boy with a price on his head. The man continued, and a savage with a bounty double that. "You give him up, we'll make it quick." No answer. The man turned to his men, chuckling. Guess they wanted the hard way. He raised a torch, and the first trap snapped. A man screamed as the spike pit gave way, his legs skewered through. Then chaos. Dakota moved like smoke, rising from nowhere, loosing arrows in silence. One raider fell face first. Another gasped and clutched at his throat. Caleb burst from cover and slashed a man's calf, sending him crashing into a ditch. He didn't wait to see the result. Moved on. Fast. Controlled. Gunfire lit up the clearing. Dakota dropped behind a log, reloading. An explosion of bark erupted beside him. He was hit. "Dakota!" Caleb yelled. The man grunted, blood spilling from his side, but waved Caleb back. Too late. Fowler stepped into the clearing, gun in hand, hat low, face half shadowed, just like that night at the fence. His lips curled when he saw Caleb. Well, look who grew teeth. Caleb stepped forward, standing between Dakota and the others. His hands trembled, but he raised about Dakota had left behind. He knocked an arrow, heart slamming. Fowler sneered. "You think you're something now? Ain't got no name, no kin, no claim on life. You're still nothing. Boy." Caleb breathed deep. The night smelled of pine, blood, and smoke. "I got me," he said, "and that's enough." He let the arrow fly. It hit Fowler square in the chest. The man stumbled back, shocked, then dropped like a sack of rock. Silence fell. The remaining raiders fled into the woods, leaving behind their wounded and their dead. Caleb ran to Dakota. Blood soaked his side, but he was alive. Breathing shallow. Eyes open. Caleb pressed cloth to the wound, hands steady. "You're okay," he whispered. "You're okay." Dawn crept in behind them, pale light spilling across the trees. Smoke drifted up from the torches, now abandoned in the dirt. Crows circled above. Caleb walked among the fallen. He gathered what he could, took nothing for trophies, just piled the bodies, friend and enemy alike, and lit a low fire. He didn't know if all of them deserved burial, but they deserved rest. When the flames died, Dakota stirred. He reached into a pouch at his belt and pulled something small, a jar of ochre clay. He dipped 2 fingers into it and painted Caleb's forehead, 3 lines down, 1 across. A sign of passage, of becoming. They said nothing. Later that morning, they climbed. Dakota leaned heavy on Caleb's shoulder as they reached the ridge. Below, nestled in the valley, was a settlement. Small houses, smoke rising from chimneys, children chasing chickens in the mud, black families, freedmen, survivors like them, people building a world from ash and stubborn hope. Caleb stared down at it, heart tight. Dakota stood beside him. Then he turned and walked away, back into the trees, back into the silence. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Caleb stood alone on the ridge for a long while. Then he started down, toward the people, toward the fire, toward something new. He didn't look back.